today, myself, I'm Agne Medlovita, I'm a specification consultant, so I'll be doing a little introduction to today's event, and then we've got Elena and Iria that will be presenting from the small studio. So yeah, I'll start with a little introduction. As in, nature loss is one of the most important issues that is affecting the world at the moment, and it's increasingly being talked as serious as the climate change, and we as a business need to take our own kind of impact and responsibility seriously for nature loss. And we know that our customers are facing the same challenge, where any new builds required to replace plus 10% of any biodiversity that is taken away. So what we're doing is we're looking at how our products can support our customers and their projects to build that biodiversity into the new developments and the projects they're working on. And also as a business, we're looking into kind of our own company and how we are becoming a net gain biodiverse company. So that's a little introduction, and I'll hand over to Helena and Iria to talk about the project where they have built in the biodiversity products.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Agnes. Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? My name is Elena. I'm from a small studio. My colleague Iria is also from a small studio. And thanks for being here. I'm really excited that Ibstock has invited us, because when we started this a year and a half ago, I never in my wildest dreams thought Ibstock would be interested in collaborating with us, but it's turned out into a perfect project that's gone from small into like real life, into building, and now we're working with Ibstock on this from the very beginning. A small studio is a chartered RIBA practice. We're based in South London, and we work as a platform for projects both small and larger. We are a team of 6 people, and depending on the project we will collaborate, for example, like we have here, or we'll be doing work in-house. And instead of just talking you through that, I'll give you a brief introduction like this into our studio so you can understand how this project began, because it has. A small studio has been in South London for a decade. So when it was time to find a new home, we knew where we wanted to be. While exploring a declining high street with little foot traffic, we found an off-licence that had been vacant for years and was in need of some love. A perfect home for a small studio. That's us, right there. Iria, our material specialist. Calliope, our associate architect. And me, Elena, the founder. Our new home represents what we're about here at a small studio. Community, craft, and caring for the environment. This project is no different. We built a place with open doors that invites people in, for working, for making, and for meeting. We're revitalizing the neighborhood and bringing people back to the high street. It's a pilot project that can be part of a bigger change across UK high streets. Our craft is focused, down to the smallest detail. Just ask Iria, who's created a materials library with over 2,000 samples. They're all catalogued with our in-house passport system, rating the environmental impact they have, with new ones being added daily. It even includes light specs, because I'm personally obsessed with a good light. Or check in with Calliope, our hardcore contract administrator who makes sure her questions never go unanswered. No matter what type of project we're working on, who we're working with. Yes, those are bats. Or where the site is, because we do love to travel. Our priority is always the same. Creating projects that know how to age that care for our planet, and that focus on craft. That's why we're a small studio. It's not about the size, it's about the attention. All made with a lot of love and a lot of coffee.
So, like this film, we're not going to watch that again. Like this film introduced, when we did finally move into our off license, we really struggled to get permission to change the use from an off license into a co-working space. And we never thought that that would be one of our first kind of barriers into going into this co-working space. So what we ended up doing was opening up a wider consultation amongst the community called the Power of the High Street, because we knew there was an issue around high streets and we knew they had to, in a way, be reinvented, but the local authority, through its local plan, wasn't making it easier. And if, you know, if we specialize in planning and architecture, we're struggling to reinvent a tiny little shop. We thought, well, how are bigger businesses, bigger landlords going to achieve this? And then when the pandemic hit, we were all housebound and digitized. And with an LFA event 2 years ago, we just took the opportunity to hold a month-long consultation throughout June with 4 key themes: landscape, habitat, use, and one of them was journey. And we wanted to understand how people worked and how people used the high street and how they walked, you know, from the station to their house, or when they actually access the high street. And this was probably our most unsuccessful theme. We didn't have a lot of people answering. We had made little maps and we had asked for questionnaires and people to draw out the route. But we had one email in our inbox, which was fantastic, and it was Jo, who's unfortunately not here today, but she's feeling unwell and she sent her regards. And Jo was on furlough from the Bat Conservation Trust, and she is the urban habitat bat specialist. And she wrote to us and she said, actually, there are a lot of bats above the high street in West Norwood, and they're commuting from Streatham Common, Crystal Palace, up to Brockwell Park, and a lot of them don't have a place to rest, to nest, to roost. So she helped us work out the map that we wanted, but it wasn't actually about what was happening on the high street. At ground level, it was an aerial high street. And so with Jo, we started this project called the Bats Highway. It was initially called the Bats Highway for those under 15, and the Green Infrastructure Link for those over 16, because adults generally already have their opinion around bats. So we made the Bats Highway. We drew up a map just showing where all of the green pockets in South London were and how we wanted to emphasize the route that bats were using, and potentially showing people down on the ground, whether they live in a small flat with a little terrace or have access to a public space, or if they live in one of the bigger houses, how they could contribute to making a habitat that was bat friendly. And if you bear with me, we ended up making our backpack with a little booklet explaining everything, and it's very child friendly, so it has some DIY cards about how children can interact. But we also made a little film which explains the project slightly better than I have explained it. So I'm just going to put that. It's 1 minute. It's not very long.
Bats haven't had the easiest time lately. COVID-19 has given them an undeserved bad reputation, which is a real shame, because bats are harmless and actually pretty cool. Bats work as pollinators, seed dispersers, pest controllers, and bioindicators, which means they act as a thermometer of an environment's well-being. So where their populations are doing well, it means the local environment is functioning properly. They are also unique creatures. Did you know that bats are the only true flying mammals? Just like us, they are warm-blooded and give birth to their young and produce milk for sucking. In Britain, there are 18 species, but bats are taking a hit and are at risk of disappearing altogether because of harm from poorly designed lighting, building repairs and development road building, cat attacks, and not having a place to roost where they raise their young because they only have one baby per year. To thrive, bats need to do 3 things. roost, forage, and commute. So that's why we've created the Bats Highway, a project to raise bat awareness, to protect them where they are present, and give you tips and tricks to improve bat habitats where they need a little extra help. That's why high streets are great. Imagine if we could build a highway to connect big parks for bats to use. In South London, Brockwell Park, Streatham Common and Crystal Palace Park are not connected, but Norwood High Street runs between them. ASML Studio is right in the middle, so we've given them a pit stop. It's like a bed and breakfast, but for bats. So to welcome the bats, we've installed an insect hotel, placed a bat box, planted seeds to attract insects, we're building a pond, and a compost heap. By doing this, we are giving bats what they need to continue their journey between parks, helping them go from surviving to thriving. So imagine if more people did the same, even smaller, on a balcony or on the curb, or bigger, in a garden or square. It would be so batty, bat-tastic, unbelievable. Okay, I'll stop. Just remember, a healthy planet is a green, connected planet full of bats. So look up and join us in this project by downloading your own bat pack to make your corner bat-friendly.
So we made this video and we've been distributing it and trying to work with the local schools, because there is a real emphasis on working with young people and children. And all of the information and all of the collaborative process wouldn't have been possible without Jo, who has so much knowledge, and she also does bat walks around the neighborhoods, in the parks, because she's also a local resident. So Jo was going to slip in and tell you a little bit more about the science and the facts and the data behind this. She was very diligent and made great notes. So my colleague Iria is going to tell you about those notes in her place. And I will come back.
So yeah, I'm talking in behalf of Jo, so she's the expert. I'm gonna read her notes. And at the small studio, we were very lucky to have Jo with us during her furlough times during the summer 2020. She's an ecologist specializing in urban bats. She had an interest on what could be done locally in South London for our bat populations. This all stems from her day job as the Built Environment Manager at the Bat Conservation Trust. They are the only conservation charity in the UK who focus on bats and the habitats that support them. They provide support right across the bat conservation spectrum, from industry stakeholders such as yourself to bat carers, bat groups, ecological consultants to members of the public. Her focus is on looking at the challenges but also opportunities that the built environment holds for our bat species. And the reason why the Bat Conservation Trust is so important is because we actually have a great variety of bat species in the UK that can be found around the country. As we learned previously, we have 18 species of bats in the UK, and roughly the further north you go, the harsher the conditions and less varied the habitats, the less species of bats there are. However, due to loss of natural habitats, all of our bats have roosting sites where they hibernate or bring up their young associated with our built structures. For some species, our built structures are so important that they can be thought of as a building reliant. How do bats use our built structures? For all the species of bat that breed in the UK, the roosting habits can be divided as crevice dwellers, roof void dwellers, void and crevice dwellers, void and flying space dwellers. This is very technical, I can explain more. Joe says that it's important to understand the differences between what our bats need to survive, to not only be able to protect them and adhere to the law, but also to improve our built environments for bats. And here is some interesting data as well. The loss of bats roosting, foraging, and commuting habitats accelerated after the Industrial Revolution due to land clearance, intensification of farming, the use of insecticides and pollutants such as light and noise. Recent monitoring is starting to show a slow recovery due to conservation efforts and their legal protection. But ecology, unfortunately, hinders this as they only have one young a year if they breed at all. Their recovery and status is important, not just because of their intrinsic value as unique mammals, but also because, as discussed, bats are bioindicators species. A healthy bat population in an area indicates a properly functioning environment for the species inhabiting it, which include us. A good local environment affects things such as our physical and mental well-being, which relates to issues such as poor productivity and attendance at work or school, and even recovery time in hospital. We can all appreciate, especially after the last couple of years, how beneficial spending time in nature is. Understanding how and if it is working is key to being able to provide this resource for us in the future. Bats sit at the top of this ecosystem, including their insect prey, which makes them great for pest suppression too. The historical losses of bat numbers and the importance of bats to the environment is why all of our bats are fully protected under the law. But what do we need to protect them from? Activities that remove habitat that allows bats to feed or move through the landscape are fairly obvious, such as land clearance or cutting down trees. However, other activities have the same impact and might not be as obvious, such as heavy pesticide use altering the insects present, or light pollution that creates barriers through the landscape. Gaps in dark green corridors caused by vegetation removal or lighting are particularly harmful to nocturnal species such as bats because it leaves them open to predation, so bats will avoid very lit open spaces. Our cities are sadly full of these, creating ecological deserts and cutting people off from contact with nature. This is why new policies relating specifically to the protection and creation of habitat are coming through. Biodiversity Net Gain BNG is an approach to development and/or land management that aims to leave the natural environment in a measurable better state than it was beforehand. Mandatory BNG, as set out in the Environment Act 2021 and is likely to become law in 2023. The Act sets out the key components to mandatory BNG, and these include minimum 10% gain required calculated using biodiversity metric and approval of net gain plan. The mitigation hierarchy still applies of avoidance, mitigation, and compensation for biodiversity loss. Does not change existing legal, environmental, and wildlife protections. There is a wealth of best practice guidance out there relating to protecting bats and the wider landscape from the impacts of poor landscape design and the impacts of artificial lighting, including that created by the VCT that is free to download. It is therefore easier than ever to ensure responsible and sustainable practice in the industry. And that's all from Joe.
So just bringing it back to the building industry, we have a materials library in the studio. It's a sustainable building, it's a material library we use for all of our projects, but we've kind of emphasized on the sustainability factor. And obviously the Swift bricks and Ibstock's bat bricks have center stage there, like this eco-habitat range. We have found it increasingly difficult to convince clients to incorporate these elements into private residential homes. There's a misunderstanding that by installing a bat brick, you're giving bats a home inside your house. And so we recently just completed one project, which is an extension in ancient woodland in the Dulwich Estate. It's in South London. And we designed it in a way that was very much about protecting the woodlands that the extension was in, a thriving green roof, subdued lighting, and then towards the front of the extension or the front of this project, we've installed a bat brick. So this hasn't been here for more than 4 months, and we just need to speak to Joe about how we can try and monitor with the client when the bat brick is in use. But we think that now we have this case study, and it hasn't been published yet, so we haven't really shown any pictures of the space. Now that we have a pilot project and we have a case study that we can show, it might help to kind of promote or convince people that actually it's very, very minimal impact externally to use these eco range products, but in a way it's taking the bats out of your loft and into a nice, secure cavity shelter. And we're really excited about this because we're trying to use, obviously, landscape strategies, architecture, building strategies, and community strategies to promote bats and to increase them in the environment. So having this live project is great. And just trying to tie in all of those strategies in both our landscape projects and our small-scale private residential work and our larger public work, we do always try to include the sustainability study that moves just beyond thermal performance of a building, but tries to really bridge anything that has to do with planning policy through to small landscape interventions that you can include in your houses, in your neighborhoods, even in your gardens. So this passport system that we talked about in the video that Iria has been developing goes through right into our feasibility studies and all of our RIBA workstage packages, and we just keep pushing that forward. So that's the end of what I was here to say. We did bring some backpacks. You're more than welcome to take one. We knew when we did this that it would be our first design product for sale that would never make any money. So you can either pitch in if you want, and we give 10% to the Bat Conservation Trust, or you're especially because we've bought some of these, but we haven't brought the bricks. These backpacks usually bring Ibstock bricks. Or you're very welcome to take one, especially if you have a kind of young person that you can give it to with the DIY cards and manuals. So I'll just hand over back to Agne.
So thank you very much for listening and for taking your time to hear about the bats and our eco range. Just a little kind of closing in introduction in what Ibstock is, because some of the people might know, some might not. So we are a manufacturer of clay and concrete products, and we've got over 30 sites across UK. So if you've got any inquiries for clay or concrete, feel free to stop by and ask us for any assistance. So thank you very much for coming and spending this afternoon with us.